Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. This is part two of the Kevin Shipp interview. Of course, I want to hold this book. It's a fantastic book, written a few years ago, but it's timeless. It's everything you want to know. This did not go out of style. What he said in this book is going on to this very day, and then some. Of course, it's former CIA officer Kevin Shipp, who is an expert in counterintelligence. He has very high security clearances. At one point, he protected his boss, William Casey, at his house. So you have to have a pretty high clearance. Kevin Shipp, we're glad to have you back for part two here. We're talking about the economy.
Greg, it's always good to be with you. It's good to be back.
You know, in the pre-interview, we were talking about the Fed, and the president has said awful things about the Fed is my enemy. The Fed is the enemy. The Fed is screwed up. They talking about most currently about the yuan, them devaluing the yuan, which is really hurting the Chinese, according to Jim Rickards. They're having capital outflows. And then this comes up, and this is why I want to start this thing here. And you've done a lot of stuff, and you've taken a lot of hit for your criticism and your analysis of the Federal Reserve. But this just broke last week. Powell creates media blackout for Fed staff. That includes everything. And then we have Jay Powell is determined not to fuel the struggle between an independent Fed and the president and President Trump. Independent Fed. Whew. Well, anyway, what do you make of this? That Powell is ordering a media blackout for everybody in the Fed, all the governors, presidents, everybody at the Fed. Only Powell is talking. What do you make of this?
Yeah, that's right, Greg. And God bless Donald Trump, because he's the first president to call out the Fed like he's doing, and he's got them kind of shaking in their boots. When the Fed gags their own board of directors and all their members, that's not good. Something not good is going on. Perhaps their plans to bring interest rates down to zero. Perhaps the fact that they think we're entering into not just the U.S. but a global recession. So they've put the lid on any comments coming out of the Fed, and they've done it for a reason I think that is concerning.
That's never happened before. I don't ever remember this ever happening before.
No, me neither.
So something big must be coming down the pipe.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I think so. Yeah. And I think it's tied to a potential global recession and possibly a U.S. recession. I think that's what then we may see some more quantitative easing. We may see, and this is what they're trying to keep secret, interest rates go down to zero, but they don't want the public or even the president to know what they're about to do.
And you have said that you have come out in the past and said the Fed, and Trump will say this, that the Fed is our enemy. He says, my enemy.
Yeah.
You're saying the Fed is out to get Donald Trump. Why do you say that?
Well, this is what I said before and took some heat for, but I'll say it again. Under Barack Obama, the Fed didn't raise interest rates. I think only 2/4 of a rate under Obama. Under President Trump, they kicked into full gear and have done 7 interest rate adjustments in just 2 years, starting just after his inauguration. So it was apparent that the Fed waited until Trump was elected to start hammering out and pounding on the economy, which apparently they did not want to do under Obama. So can you raise the suspicion that the Fed is against Trump, or the Fed is trying to take the credit for the economy away from Trump? I think that appears to be entirely possible.
You think they're out to basically have a recession and blame it on Trump?
Yeah, that's right. And Yellen and Bernanke both intended to shift attention away from the Fed and to Trump in terms of any recession or any economic problems. And that's a war between us. And Trump has said it exactly right. It's a war between Trump and the Federal Reserve, which, of course, is not federal and it has no reserves.
And you think that they're doing this because they want to hurt his chances for re-election?
What's
the motivation? What's the motivation? Why would the Fed wanted to go after the president?
Well, the president is changing the U.S. economy for the better, and that brings it out of the Fed's control. The Fed has had control of our economy since 1913, and now here comes a president that says, no, I'm not giving you full control, and the Fed has never experienced that from any president before, so they're fighting back. And now they've always been doing things in secret. They're made up of foreign banks, as you know, the identities of which are secret. Their board members, board of directors are all secret. Their meeting minutes are secret. So everything the Fed does is in secret already. So the American people and Congress and the Senate have no idea what the Fed is doing. The Fed's used to running the U.S. economic show, and here comes a president that is starting to say, "Oh no, you don't." No, and now he's essentially right. He's at war with the Fed, and the Fed's putting the lid on all their people and issuing a gag order to keep them from talking about what the Fed plans to do. For example, 0% interest rates and/or more quantitative easing, which is a bad sign and could indicate a coming global recession and perhaps even one in the United States.
And you think that the Fed, do you think Trump's right when he says this? The Fed caused this?
I do. I've taken heat for saying that, but I do, absolutely.
Explain.
Well, the Fed is responsible for this because if you look at, and you and I went through these in the pre-show, you look at the number of times and how much the Fed has manipulated and raised interest rates under Trump compared to Obama, and Obama's economy was even worse. So it just indicates, at least to me, and I think some others, there's an article, I think in American Spectator, that the Fed is actually trying to manipulate interest rates against Trump's booming economy to make it look like Trump is not in control, but they're in control. And I think it's an anti-Trump move.
And what do you think he's been so overt about the blaming the Fed? I mean, he one quote tweet after another. The Fed doesn't know what they're doing. They're our enemy. They've caused this thing. They're off the ball. They've raising rates. They're killing the economy. He actually came out and said they're killing. So did John Williams at shadowstats.com. Mm-hmm. He originally said this a while back, and 4 days after we did an interview, Donald Trump's out saying the Fed's killing the economy.
Yeah.
And you think that that's a good appraisal? What is his battle plan? Why is he so boisterous and tweeting and blaming the Fed? What is the battle plan of that?
In my view, I think Trump is convinced that the Fed is going to try to destroy his advances in the economy to make 2020 less possible for re-election and actually manipulate the political landscape. And I think Trump pretty clearly and I think wisely is aware of what they're doing. And that's when he comes out with these tweets, especially this one, that was radical. Many of us loved hearing it, that somebody's finally standing up to the Fed, which Trump is doing, because I think he's convinced they're going to try to manipulate the 2020 elections and make any recession look like it's Trump's fault, not the Fed's fault.
And Trump is turning that back on them.
Yeah, as he does so well. Yeah.
He's blaming it right. They've been blaming the Fed all along.
Mm-hmm. And he's right.
But do you think that and now we're going to get out here in the deep blue here. Do you think that there's some people that say that the Fed has to go, that they've lost their charter anyway back in 2013, and that the Fed is going to dump them and come up with a new currency? What do you think about, though, people saying that the Fed is going to get, because that Trump is actually, even if he doesn't want to, he's going to force the Fed to be dumped. He's going to force them out of our landscape and take us back to a treasury, a dollar. What do you think about what's going to happen to the Fed? How is this going to play out?
Well, I think that's the smartest thing that Trump could ever do, would be to abolish the Fed. The Fed was secretly created in 1913 against the will of the people and has been running our economy secretly ever since. The best thing we could do. And they're made up of foreign banks, which people need to understand. This is not a U.S. Federal Reserve. This is made up of foreign central banks, also all of whom are in secret. I think that would be the best thing to do is eliminate the Fed and go to a more stable economy, without a doubt.
Do you think Donald Trump's going to do that? Do you think the plans are?
Greg, I don't know. The way he's talking, it looks possible, and probably he's waiting till his second term to really come out with his plans for the Fed. So it's kind of hard to speculate now. We'll see after 2020. I believe he'll be elected strongly. Then we'll see.
You think even if we get a market sell-off or a crash, because some people are saying it's pretty shaky out there. I mean, it's not just it's shaky in the world. Is the U.S. so we have a good economy? Yeah, but relative to the rest of the world, we do. All this capital's coming in, according to Martin Armstrong and others. And so, but you're saying that you think he'll be reelected in 2020, even if we get a market crash in the stock market.
Yeah, I do.
Why?
And I think people are number one, the things that Trump has done, some of us only dreamed about for decades that he's doing. And two, I think it's going to be made public by shows like yours and others that the recession was not caused by Trump. Trump gave us a robust economy, and the facts are there. So if there is a recession, I think Trump has, he had 63 million supporters. I think that has increased by at least 25%. So he's got more people behind him. So I don't think that's going to affect his reelection.
Wow. You think even if we get into because you have people like Bill Maher, that idiot, hoping for an awful economy and a market crash because he wants Trump not to be elected, but you don't think that's going to work out?
Nope, I do not. No, no. The people will be able to see, and I think a lot of people out there in the press and journalism are telling people that this recession has been coming. It's been a long time coming. We have $22 trillion in U.S. debt. There's $250 trillion in the global debt. We've got trillions in derivatives, pension debt, Social Security, Medicaid debt, and it would take about $100 trillion to pay all that off. That's not going to happen. Trump can't stop that. Trump can't do anything about that. Nobody can do it. Mathematically, it's going to happen. So I think people are going to understand that they can't blame this on Trump. This is a system and a problem that was well in place before he even gotten in office. And amazingly, he's turned the economy around despite this.
Do you think that he will default on debt? Do you think he's going to default on debt? Do you think if you think a default is inevitable, if we can't make the payments, is the default inevitable?
That would be the only resort. Yeah.
If you were a betting man, do you think that that Donald Trump's going to be matched up to Biden or Pocahontas? Or I think the debates for the Democrats have actually hurt the Democrats.
Oh, they have badly. I don't think Biden's going to make it.
Watch your tapping on the desk. You're tapping on the desk. Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think Biden is going to make it for a variety of reasons. He's gaffing all over the place. He seems to be having a lot of senior moments. He's not radical enough for a lot of the leftists. So I think eventually he's going to bow out. I think Elizabeth Warren is going to be neck and neck with Bernie Sanders, and I think she'll probably overtake Bernie Sanders, and she may even take the nomination.
Wow. You have the Drudge Report talking about how, Elizabeth Warren packed him in, 700 people. And then you look at Donald Trump's New Hampshire rally.
Yeah.
It's thousands of people.
Yeah.
Where is the disconnect? Are people really watching what's going on? I mean, you can't get a Democrat candidate that can get 1,000 people to show up at a rally.
Oh yeah. See, what they didn't know in the last election is there is a sleeping bear out there that's ready to wake up again in the next election, and there are millions and millions of Americans that support Trump. They're just not saying anything about it. They're keeping it quiet. That's what happened the first time. That's why the polls were wrong. That's why it freaked the entire DNC out, and everybody was dumbfounded because this bear was out there that everybody was just waiting to go into the ballot box and punch that button, pull that lever, whatever, and surprised everybody. That same thing's going to happen now. That bear is out there, and it's only grown. And so these people are going to come out of the woodwork in 2020, and they're going to elect Trump, and I think it's going to be by a wide margin.
What about the gold standard? What about bringing back? You've heard about this. I don't know if your intel sources are telling you about this, pinging you on this. Is Trump? Is he planning some sort of new currency or gold standard?
I haven't heard anything at all about that. That would be the smart thing and almost the only thing to do. I haven't heard anything about Trump planning to do that.
Okay. What about another thing that we brought up, which is a stunning story that's not getting much play in the mainstream media, but I mean, when you have this, and I brought this up in my weekly news wrap up, GE falls the most in 11 years after Madoff whistleblower calls it a bigger fraud than Enron. We're talking about General Electric, and this is Harry Markopoulos, the guy that exposed, it took him a long time to expose it, the Bernie Madoff fraud, which, of course, was helped out by J.P. Morgan Chase, was the big bank that got off by paying a fine. But what are the implications of General Electric being deemed a fraud?
Oh, goodness gracious. By his investigation, they found that GE has $38 billion in fraud at their conglomerate. And he says that's merely just the tip of the iceberg regarding the fraud that GE has been involved in. He claims that General Electric is essentially an insolvent and that its industrial business have a working capital deficit of $20 billion. And as we know, their stock just dropped pretty dramatically. They have, according to him, they have $60 billion in liabilities and only $40 billion in assets and $38 billion in accounting fraud. His conclusion is that it's very probable that GE will go into bankruptcy.
You know, you are, you've said this before. You said we're going to do a show on this and talk about it. You know, you have an off the grid house. You've got solar
Yes.
panels, you've got a well, you've got, a pretty tight location somewhere in the southeast there. You're pretty much off the grid.
Yeah.
How bad do you think this is going to get in terms of a market? You think there's a market meltdown, first of all? Do you think
I
that we
do.
have a market meltdown coming?
Yes, I do, and that's one of two reasons I went off the grid. I do. I do think there's a market meltdown coming. Yes.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, if you look at what is going on now with some of the things we just talked about, the deficit both here and globally, there's a slowdown. We were talking earlier about China. One of their big banks has just gone down. Looks like another one is going down. China's having some serious economic problems. The Deutsche Bank in Germany is having serious problems. They're showing a slowdown. You got all these global things happening now. GE, the central banks are the only thing the world economy has left. And if they fail and these big businesses fail, it is all over.
And how bad do you think it'll be for the man on the street?
Yeah, prices are going to go up astronomically. There's going to be things that are not available. We may see gas lines again. We'll see certain things in the stores that the prices will go up. There will be a recession, a bad one. Prices will go up. It's going to affect the man on the street big time. And then we'll see what the Fed does. The government may get very aggressive if it gets that bad. And so, as you do, we all encourage people, get out of debt and start preparing yourself, because this looks like it's going to happen.
What do you mean by the Fed may get aggressive? What do you mean by that?
Well, they could start cranking out more monopoly money to try to fill the gap in this huge recession if and when it comes. They could start cranking out more money. They could take us into negative interest rates, like that's happening in several countries in Europe. They could actually take us down into negative interest rates, and all of this would affect the dollar. The dollar would lose its value, and then, of course, you got Russia and China switching over to the yuan instead of the U.S. dollar as currency. And all of this, it's almost like the perfect storm. It's all happening at once.
Um, will what will the man on the street be able to? How will they be able to? So when do you think this is going to happen? Do you think it's going to happen before the 2020 election or after the 2020 election? I mean, my premise has been, I've been saying this for a while, that I think Donald Trump's trying to stretch this out till after the election, but maybe he doesn't do it. I don't know. What is your read on what's the timing of all this?
Well, I think sometime from this December, maybe through March of 2020, this is going to start unfolding and start happening. So that's pretty much in the near term. So it could very well happen before the 2020 election. And then, of course, we'll see how Trump handles that. I don't think there's any better person in the White House to handle it than Trump. I think he's the best one if that does indeed happen. But it could be by March of 2020.
So you don't think he makes it to past the election?
No.
Wow, why do you say that?
Well, I mean, I don't think he. No. Let me.
I mean, until we have a meltdown, but you don't think we'll make it past you don't think we'll make it past the 2020 election and get into 2021 before he has to deal with some major problems? You think the problems are coming earlier? Why?
I do. If you look at some of the things we just talked about, these companies are going into bankruptcy. There's a global slowdown. The debt is increasing. Of course, in addition to that, you and I talked about, we've got this $21 trillion in additional debt that they're hiding and have put under national security now. The indicators are there by every financial study that I've read, and you know a lot more about that than I do. There is a global slowdown starting to happen, and it looks like the indicators are there for a recession in the United States. It's real possible. I would say some of the experts that I researched said that after this kind of inversion in Treasury bonds, usually it's about 12 months before a recession hits. So 12 to 16 months. So we'll see if that's the case. So I would say that, but it could happen sooner than that. And I would say probably by March of 2020, this thing could start occurring. That would be before, of course, the elections. And it's going to be a mess. But I think Trump's support is too strong. I think he'll make it through that. I'm sure, as you are, that he's trying to hold it off until after the election. We'll see if they're able to pull that off, because that would be a big deal and really help his being reelected. So it's going to be messy.
Your buddies, you say you have a lot of people that you still know at the CIA. What are your friends that, without revealing any sources, but just the people that you talk to still, and you have many people that really like you and say, "Go for it, man! You're a whistleblower. We love you." You have a lot of support at the CIA. People like what you're doing, even though some people like Brennan did like what you were doing. What do your buddies at the CIA say about what's going on with the economy, with Epstein, with the FBI and DOJ, and this takedown of the president? What are your buddies saying about the overall environment here? It looks like the perfect storm of the geopolitical and financial problems.
Yes, yes, it does. No, they're not largely focused on that. When you're inside the CIA, all your attention and focus is on what you're doing, what operation you're doing, what analysis you're doing. I can tell you this: morale is terrible there because of the PC diversity thing that's happening, where they're replacing people who are not qualified in positions just to adjust the demographics. So because of that, morale is just absolutely horrible. And there are people in positions of management in the CIA. Started when I was there. I wrote an article in 1994, which somebody leaked. It's out there on the internet, about how multicultural diversity, not EEO. We all support that. We all support equality and diverse people in government, as long as the person qualifies. And when I left, they were putting people in supervisory positions that had no expertise in that field whatsoever, simply because of the diversity agenda that was going on. That is what people are most miserable about in the CIA. They're not working for bosses. They're out there in the field risking their life, and their bosses never stepped foot out of headquarters. So I think that's what they're focused on. The ones that I've talked to very recently, they're focused on that, not really on what's going on with the economy and all this other stuff. They're just focused inside the CIA.
And what would you tell people? I always ask this question, and I get a variety of answers. Sometimes I don't get very good answers on it. But what would you tell the little guy to be doing? I mean, this is from a CIA officer, and you're saying it's coming. And this is not a maybe that we're going to have a meltdown, another big meltdown. It is coming. Is it going to be worse than the 2008 meltdown? And what would you tell people to do?
Yes, I think it's
the little guy.
Yes, I think it's going to be worse, and I think it's going to be global. Number one, I'd say get out of debt. Number two, start learning how to be self-sufficient, because a lot of jobs are going to vanish overnight. Start planning on how to be self-sufficient. If you have a piece of land, whether it's an acre or more, or whether you have a house in the neighborhood, start building yourself an off-the-grid house and ways to sustain yourself with your own food. Best thing to do, if people can do it, and everybody can, if they get this vision and stick to it. Get yourself an acre or more of land somewhere and build yourself an off-the-grid farm that's solar powered, disconnected from the grid, and where you're growing your own things, and have about 6 months of freeze-dried food saved up. That's what I would advise people to do.
Wow. Is cash going to work in this meltdown? Is cash going to? We keep hearing we're going to go to a cashless society. Is cash going to work in this next coming meltdown?
No, the dollar will be devalued. Cash won't work. People are going to be going. If you remember when Germany, when there was a catastrophe financially there, the German elite, who had plenty of gold, went out and bought produce from the farmers. Farmers were doing just fine because they were growing their own. So even the elite had to go out to the German farmers that were growing fruits and vegetables to buy them from them. So gold and silver, of course, are going to be, the dollar is going to go down in value. So gold and silver obviously will be the ways to go. And then you got to think about medicine. And people's health and the medicines that they take. A lot of people who talk about this and how to prepare for it, they don't discuss the medical side. What about your medications? What about the cost of your medications? It's going to affect that. So if people can talk to their doctors and get 90-day supplies of everything, I mean, this impacts every area of your life. And the more independent people are, the less they're going to suffer when this happens.
Kevin Shipp, a great part one for you folks out there. Part one was all about the interconnectivity of the Epstein case and the attempt, the failed coup, the hoax of the Russia investigation, and the people that are going to get hopefully in trouble for that. Part two is about the economy and the Fed, and I just want people to know that you have a donation page in the middle of your page, and also let me interrupt here. You also have a Patreon channel, and every week you do a deep dive on a subject. I think this week you did a big deep dive on Jeffrey Epstein. I know you spent a lot of hours on that. Tell me about your Patreon channel and what you're talking about this week.
Well, they can find me on patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp. And every week I do a deep, detailed dive into important subjects. This week, we're going to talk about the economic crisis, which you and I have just discussed here. We'll be getting into the economic crisis and preparation for that, and that'll be this coming Thursday, 7 p.m., patreon.com/Kevin_Shipp.
And then last week you did a big dive on, which is, you go on now. This is before you did a big dive on Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes. Yeah, in detail. Yeah, kind of a forensic examination of the whole thing. Yes.
Well, that's pretty good. And what does it cost to be a Patreon member to get that access?
There's a $1 membership, but the intelligence assessment that we're talking about starts at $5 a month membership, which of course is a steal. But I'm doing this to be separate from YouTube's manipulation. They've already manipulated some of my videos. Twitter has knocked out a couple of my tweets. So I've gone to patreon.com, especially at tier 2, the $5 level, so that I don't have a problem with YouTube's algorithms or Twitter dropping tweets. And it's worked out very well. No one's been able to manipulate what I'm doing, and it's a great platform for me to put things out there that are not messed with by YouTube and Twitter.
I'm smiling. Yeah, I understand. I feel your pain on that, my friend. Kevin Shipp, the website is fortheloveoffreedom.net. I will put that up. If you scroll down to the middle, you'll see Patreon, you'll see a donation page, a snail mail page, I think a GoFundMe page for your kids' college education. You got creamed with all this. You've suffered greatly being a whistleblower. I mean, they hate your book. You can also buy the book there. Sorry, I had to reach out of frame. Your book, the CIA took away your pension. They tried to poison you and your family. All kinds of other fun. You've paid a price to be a patriot, my friend. And thank you for being a regular and coming on USAWatchdog.com. Kevin Shipp, the published, very popular book from the Company of Shadows, also on his website. Kevin Shipp, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you very much, Greg. You're always my top priority. Thank you.